All right, these are the notes for nucleic acids. So, nucleic acids transmit information and they store information. And this is the information like DNA and RNA. This is what we're talking about. That's crucial to heredity, which is one of our properties of life. There are two classes of nucleic acids, ribonucleic acids, which stand for RNAs, or RNA stands for ribonucleic acids. And then you have deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. So make sure you know what those stand for. And so nucleic acids is the genetic information that's held in the DNA. It has all the information for making an individual. RNA transmits this information from the DNA into cellular structure. And we'll get into more of that later on in semester 2. There is a link here of 2 videos that are helpful for learning about nucleic acids. All right, so what are nucleic acids made of? How am I going to be able to tell the difference between a nucleic acid, a lipid, or a carbohydrate, or a protein? Nucleic acids are made up of nucleotides. That is the name of the monomer, a nucleotide. So all nucleotides have 3 parts. The first part is a pentose sugar, which we learn what that looks like. There is a phosphate group, which we learn one of those functional groups look like. And then there's a nitrogen base, and that part is the new part, okay? But you know what nitrogen is. You know it's an element on the periodic table. So we'll get in more of this later. But right now, this is what a nucleotide is made up of. So here is your 5-carbon sugar. Remember, you start counting over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th carbon is off of the ring. All right, so that is either ribose or deoxyribose, depending on if you're talking about ribo or RNA or DNA. That is attached to a phosphate group, so that's one of our functional groups that we learned about. And then the first carbon over here is attached to this nitrogen base. And there's 4 different nitrogen bases that can be here. But you can see the nitrogens, so you should be able to recognize those nitrogens, and we just call it a nitrogen base. All right, so a nucleotide is a sugar, a nitrogen base, and a phosphate group. But there's sometimes you'll see a nucleoside, and a nucleoside is just the sugar and the nitrogen base. There is no phosphate group there. Okay. So it's just a little bit different. It just has the ring and then a base attached to it. There is no phosphate group on this side, where a nucleotide has all 3. Okay. There are 4 different nitrogen bases. They are A, adenine, G, guanine, T, thymine, and C, cytosine. We'll learn more about those later. The ones that are thymine and cytosine, those have single ring structures. Those are called pyrimidines. And purines have a double ring structure, and those are your A and your Gs. This is a way to remember them. And then here are the names of the sugars. So here's ribose. Ribose is going to be an RNA. And DNA has deoxyribose. You can see that the difference in the sugars isn't much. You can just see on carbon 2 that it's just an H on deoxyribose, and the ribose actually has that hydroxyl group. All right. And so here are what they look like. So cytosine and thymine are nitrogen bases. See how they only have 1 ring? There's 1 little ring here, but the nitrogen's in it. And purines have 2 rings, kind of side by side. And so that's your adenine and your guanine. There also is another pyrimidine called uracil, but you don't have to worry about that right now. Okay. And so nucleotides are going to bond together the same way that carbohydrates and the same way that lipids do, by condensation or dehydration synthesis reactions. The bond that forms is called a phosphodiester bond, and it, again, is a covalent bond. The linkage is between the number 5 carbon on one ribose and the number 3 carbon on the next ribose. And we'll learn about what that 5' to 3' means later. Again, it's kind of like carbohydrates. An oligonucleotide can have up to 20 nucleotides together. And then, but when you're talking about DNA and RNA, those are definitely polynucleotides because there are many. And those are the longest polymers in the world, is DNA and RNA. All right, here is a little chart to compare RNA and DNA. The sugar is different, the bases are different, and the strands are different. And you really don't need to worry about that right now. This is something that we'll be learning in semester 2. And that finishes our notes for DNA and RNA.